Hello everyone, welcome to Visual Radio. So today is April 18th, 2023, but 2 nights ago, Joe Perry played the House of Blues here in Boston. He's on tour right now. And then he's gonna come back in another tour in a few months with the Hollywood Vampires, which is Alice Cooper, Johnny Depp, very exciting. But last night I went and saw a movie called The Lost Weekend, John Lennon. And Lennon was out in LA, and I didn't know this. This is why this movie is very important. It kind of puts the puzzle together. The Hollywood Vampires started in this 1971, 1972, 1973 Los Angeles. Alice Cooper and his friends just hanging out at the clubs. They were the original Hollywood Vampires. And so the movie kind of explained that. Now they're coming through town again. Well, what we have here at ECTV, I was able to interview Joe Perry 5 years ago on a radio station. We not only have the audio, but I took a ton of photos. I think it was April 18th, today. I think it was 5 years ago today that Joe played the House of Blues. So he came back 5 years later. He had an album called Switzerland Manifesto, very good album. And I got all these photos. So I sent them over to all of us. We all have the photos now to look at. And Darren and I are going to talk a little bit about Aerosmith, Joe Perry, and then we get the 28-minute interview with Joe.
Yep.
So what I did, Darren, was I wrote Joe Perry because Billy, his wife, was my graphic artist. My record label, Van Records. So she did the Mo Tucker from the Velvet Underground, Willie Loco Alexander, and Lady Carolyn album covers. Oh, and the Boston Bootleg too. Billy did these for us. Amazing work. Billy Perry. She was Billy Montgomery way back when. Alyssa Perry and I, Joe's first wife, were in a publicity company. So Joe is such a great guy. Just awesome person. And I sent Billy the interview questions. And what I do is I don't want to talk about, let's talk about Dream On. Well, everyone knows about Dream On. Let's go, back in the day, how the band started, all the fun stuff. What was the demo that got the deal for Aerosmith with Clive Davis and Columbia Records? Those are the kind of questions I dig in. So Billy writes me, she goes, I'm not joking. She goes, my husband is like amazed at your questions. It's like a typical 70s great interview. And you'll hear it on the show. Joe says, boy, I love those questions, but we got to talk about the new album. So I guess we're going to have another interview. We're going to go back to the old questions, which I really want to get answered because Joe's got a book out, Joe and Billy, and Steve Tyler has a book out. But like I said about this movie last night, there's so much of the John Lennon, me being a huge John Lennon fan, that was murky. It wasn't the Beatles where the focus was on them all the time. So John was now in this other world, going in the studio with all these great musicians, Ringo, George Harrison. And they even have in the movie John and Paul jamming at a Harry Nilsson session, their last jam together. But all this fighting with the lawyers and everything, and then May Pang says, John walks in, Paul walks in, and there's no argument. The old friends are talking like nothing happened. Pretty amazing.
So you talked about, I want to take it back. That's I know you have a lot of history, and you said you were at the House of Blues back in 2018. Did you attend
5 years ago, yeah.
5 years ago. So you did attend that show.
I interviewed him, I think that day or the day before, and then I'm at the show with my, not this Android, but with my iPhone. The iPhone does amazing pictures.
Yeah. So you were able to get great shots, right?
Great
right
shots.
then and there.
Yeah.
You weren't expecting it.
Well,
Or you were.
I just kind of go with the flow.
Gotcha.
Like we do with the show
So
here.
the flow took you to a good place.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, these are really nice colors because the lighting, I mean, it's Joe Perry, and it's sold out. And that's a big show, House of Blues. And the crowd's roaring. And, we had Gary Sharon from Extreme. And I think Charlie Farron played. And Charlie Farron was a former lead singer of his. He had, he had the guy from Savoy Brown. the guy that passed away, Ralph Mormon. So Ralph Mormon was in the Joe Perry project. Charlie Farron did the second album, and the third album was Mark Bell of Thunder Train. And I think there was a fourth lead singer somewhere in there, but now Gary Cherone from Extreme, who played in Van Halen, I think he played this Sunday. So Joe has a lot of musicians to draw from.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out. Extreme has a fellow Azorian in the lead guitar, Nuno Betancourt.
Oh, yeah.
And I know you have a lot of experience, so that's just a random. He played with Rihanna, so it's kind of
Did he?
close to my heart. Yeah, he's from a musical family from the Azores, so my parents are from the Azores also. So you mentioned, though, that 2018, was that part of an album release for, is it Switzerland Manifesto? Do I have that right?
Switzerland Manifesto. So now here's the interesting thing. We talked about Extreme. Joe Perry's manager is the drummer from Extreme, Paul Geary. I used to book their shows at the Paradise. So I performed on stage, my band with Extreme back in the day. But they were called The Dream. So now Paul Geary's in management. I think he works with Irving Azoff. And they handle Joe Perry, separate from Aerosmith. So I'm back on the phone with Paul Geary after 40 years, and he set up the interview. And Billy set it all up, of course. Because they also have the sons of Joe Perry have a spin-off band, Dead Boots. So Billy had sent me, Dead Boots. Alyssa Perry sent me Adrian Perry, her son Adrian Perry, Joe's first son. This Beatles music that Adrian did. So I interviewed him. We can run the tape of Adrian Perry when he was younger, before he joined his brothers in Dead Boots. But what's really funny is I think it's Roman Perry in the band Dead Boots. I'm over the Perry's house in Somerville for Thanksgiving dinner. Must have been 86. I think it was 1986. Billy puts little Roman on my knee. This is how I meet Roman Perry. He's like 6 months old, and I'm like, get the $1 billion baby off my knee. I'm like, there's John Garabedian, DJ, and there's Tim Collins, Aerosmith's manager, and I'm sitting there with little baby, as nervous as you can be. Then she comes and gets him, and I said, thank you, God. The $1 billion baby. And over in the corner, Joe Perry is playing for my guitarist, Brian Bradley. And, okay, I've been to Aerosmith concerts 72, 70, way back in 72, maybe 71, right? And now we're talking 15 years later, I'm in the guy's apartment, the condo, and he's playing for my guitarist. I'm like, oh my God, this guy's a better guitarist than anyone knows. Because you see him in an intimate session, and I'm like,
right,
amazing.
And you've had the luxury of, you have like a rich history of involvement, and you've seen bands like Aerosmith pre-famous, kind of through the stages. How do you feel that the release in 2018, how does that compare to the early days of Aerosmith, or the Joe Perry evolution, let's say? How does that
Well,
compare?
as far as Joe Perry goes, I thought it was his most complete album. I love the best of Joe Perry on Raven Records. That's amazing. So you hear like the best tracks from the first 3 albums, but this is the first album where he I think Johnny Depp is on it. Oh, my friend Steve Hunter from Lou Reed's band is on it. So it's amazing. You got Steve Hunter and Johnny Depp, and they're all playing. The band is like fine wine. Joe Perry is like fine wine. Aerosmith played in 2016 at the Tweeter Great Woods Center out there in Mansfield. One of the best concerts that I've ever seen. Now, I've seen these guys over 50 years. The show, to me, was more fun than the Rolling Stones, and I've seen the Stones a number of times. It was so well put together. And even though the Guns N' Roses guy came out, Izzy Stradlin, right? Izzy's out there, and Johnny Depp. The guest stars were great, but Aerosmith had this really finely tuned show that was very exciting. And I'm like, boy, these guys have it down to a science.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a funny story on Steven Tyler of Aerosmith. My high school sweetheart, let's say, we were both in college, so this must have been like 2001. She was working at Mass Eye and Ear, and under a pseudonym, Mr. Tyler was on a very important person floor where she also worked at Mass Eye and Ear, having some sort of surgery, and I bought him ice cream. All I asked for was a signature in return, and I didn't get it. But I did buy Steven Tyler an ice cream back when I was about 20 years old.
Steven's a funny guy. So, I'm the producer now for Bobby Hebb, who wrote the great song Sunny. You know, dark days are done, bright days are here, my sunny one, so sincere. So I bring Bobby Hebb's daughter to Aerosmith, and Billy wanted to see me backstage, so I see Steven Tyler, and I said, so where's Billy? Well, I said something funny in his ear, and he turned around, a name from Back in the Saddle again, and I go, it's Joe, and he goes, oh, hi. And I said, Steven, I want you to meet Bobby Hebb's daughter. He grabs her and starts singing Sunny to her. And he's her favorite artist, and she was so touched. I just had dinner with her last Thursday night. She'd been in California for a year, and it's like, here we are at Aerosmith, and he's singing Sunny. I wish I had it on tape. He took a picture of him and her together. They take hundreds of photos backstage. It's very well tuned. They got all these years taking photos, right? And
Well, that's so valuable, right? I mean, it grows over time, the value of that backstage.
well, they put it up on
candid
their
moment.
website. So every show they have fans in back with them. I mean, they work very hard, and the fans are with. You can go on the Aerosmith website, and every show you can see tons of fans. There's pages and pages of it. What a brilliant idea! Because now
It's engaging.
Huh?
It's engaging. People will go out, look for those photos. I mean, I remember being a young person, a big thing, I don't know if it's still happening, in the early 2000s was there would be photographers at various nightclubs, and you'd go and log in to a site somewhere, and you're able to see all your professional photos. And I felt, it was engagement. It gave the photographer a marketing portal. Also, that person was working for the nightclub, selling pictures later on if someone wanted the proofs. So it's an interesting, go-to-market, when you have an engaged crowd of people. Because, and you mentioned this, right? And I'd love to hear what you thought about seeing the ascending of Aerosmith.
Well,
Because I'm sure that grew, right? It was probably backstage, might have had 20. By the time it was all over, it might have had 2,000,
well, they played the Box, which was under the theater, the Nickelodeon Theater in Boston. The Box was a nightclub, and I'm down there, and boy, they were great. Then I went up to Salisbury Beach, and what happened was Dream On started breaking in Boston. So now, let me go before Dream On. I'm at the Martha Hoople show, and Queen couldn't show up. The band Queen had to cancel. So Aerosmith filled in, and Ian Hunter just said this on an interview. Ian's a wonderful man, Martha Hoople. And Ian said, Aerosmith opened for us, and they were pretty unknown outside of Boston. And then he goes, these bands became bigger than us, bigger than Martha Hoople. Martha Hoople were very big. He said Queen, Aerosmith. And it's interesting because there I was at this show, and I knew Aerosmith. I'd seen them. It's like, oh, cool, Aerosmith's playing with Martha Hoople. And then I saw them open for the Kinks. And they were going up this, they're going up the ladder. But I saw Steve and Joe at Humble Pie, and I didn't know who Joe Perry was. But I saw Steve Tyler, and I said, this guy works hard. I'm going to get his autograph. And I don't think he'd ever given an autograph to someone in the field outside of the high school dances and stuff. I said, Steve, I want your autograph. He goes, really? I go, yeah, I want your autograph. And he writes Steve Tyler, and he puts these little arrows around it. And Joe Perry goes, what are you doing? He goes, that's how you do it, man. I had to be his first legitimate autograph, right? So then he goes, you want Joe Perry's too? I never heard of Joe Perry. I said, sure. So when Billy married him, I said, I got this autograph they did. I think it's the first they ever gave out. And I mailed her a Xerox. Is that
And you
hilarious?
didn't even have to buy him ice cream.
I didn't. Well, it was a Humble Pie show, and he was in a velour jacket, but Stephen played the part, and he had management. And it was a different time. It was a different time, Darren. I think our guest is here. Famous film director. You know what? He can come right on stage if he wants. Yeah,
Okay.
why not?
Why not? I don't need it.
Eric Taros is in the room.
Hi there, hey, good
I'm
to see you.
Pleasure to meet you.
see
Darren
you again.
Costa, Erik Taros.
Nice to see you.
I saw you last night.
Yes. Last night we were at we just had a premiere. It's a very unusual way of doing a film. Most everything else I have done had distribution all set up right from the get-go.
You notice we're not miking you?
Yeah, that's okay, because I'm talking loud. No.
No, we're not miking
Oh, I
you.
know that's right.
Isn't that great?
Oh, it saves time. No lavalier.
Yeah, could hop right in.
But anyway, yeah. So this particular picture that you came to see last night is on a limited release. Last night was the last of the premiere nights. The name of the film is The Lost Weekend: A Love Story, and it is May Pang telling her story of her 18 months that she spent with John Lennon as his lover. She had known him for a few years previous as his assistant, as the assistant to him and Yoko. But got to know May pretty good over the years, and it's a very interesting way. Everything about this film was different than anything else I've done. But should I jump into some of the other things?
Well, let's have some fun. Did you see the video I shot last night?
No, I didn't. No.
So I sent you the video.
Okay.
He does Q&A at the event.
Oh.
And
Very cool.
what is your title for the movie?
Well, they invented this title. This is called, I was given the billing of Special Content Advisor.
But you're actually a producer.
Yeah. What happened is, you see, it's real funny out in Hollywood things. I never thought I was going to care about titles, you know. I was like, just make sure the checks don't bounce, you know. And they're like, no, you're going to care about your credits, trust me. So I think my first picture was, 12 years ago. I had a very minor, more than that. You remember the Remains documentary?
Yeah.
So that was my first.
Who did that?
That one was done by Fred. I just call him Fred all the time. It'll come to me. It was an independent production.
It's Bluesheimers. Don't worry about it. It's our age.
Yeah. Well, Michael, the producer, he was a daytime drama guy. So he did like
The
Days of
Last
Our
American
Lives.
Band?
It was America's Lost Band. That's the technical name of it.
And the dude did Days of Our Lives. I interrupted you.
Yeah, he did. Well, that's the director of, I should say, the technical director of that film was the director of Days of Our Lives. So, and that was a very, very small budget. And that's also never been fully released. It only did the festival circuit. It did really, really well. But that's how I got into the business. I was, as you know, I was graphic designer for 40 years. And
You did one of my album covers.
I know. I just found a bunch of them the other day. I did the CD.
You found them? The empty
Well, I
ones?
found some empty ones. Yeah, just a few.
I'll press up more. Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, there's not many, but I mean, why not use them? You know.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I did that for many years, and one day, and it was great when I was doing album covers for Joe, or I was doing, I did a lot of biotechnology work. I still do, and I have a couple on the side still. But then I got this great offer from a health an insurance company, without naming names. And I woke up one day and I'm like, I'm working for Satan. And people would say, what do you do? Well, I'm a designer. I'm a UX designer for Satan. And I'd say, Satan gets a bad rap. Every 2 weeks when that check goes in the direct deposit, let me tell you, Satan's okay. He's just misunderstood. The rest of the time, I had trouble looking in the mirror, seriously.
Wow.
Considering the software I was working on. It was basically figuring out how to screw people out of coverage with data. So you sit there and go, you know what, Joe, you're at this age, and
You're talking to a city councilor now.
well, I'm telling you, there's stuff out there. The insurance companies have it down to a science. And so right at that moment where I was having that crisis, I get a phone call from Hollywood. Actually, no, excuse me, from London, from the Beatles. So I got to know the Beatles management, Apple, over the years by consulting little things here. My specialty is to find lost artifacts, so lost photographs, lost films, lost audio recordings. So I gained a little bit of a reputation. Apple knew who I was, and so they were making this movie, and would I come help out? So I started consulting. That film eventually became 8 days a week, and eventually had Ron Howard as the producer. But it had a whole other life before that. It took 8 years to make that film.
You mentioned artifacts.
Yes.
Can you tell us more about your collection of Beatles material?
Oh yeah, it's crazy. It's like the stuff we dig up. I'm particularly partial to home movies for some reason. I love the idea that, of course, today we think nothing of walking into a concert. You got the phone up for a couple of seconds.
There's more phones than people paying attention.
Exactly. Well, it was a little like that for a big event like the Beatles or the Rolling Stones. It was a little bit like that, and the kids would borrow, mom and dad's 8mm movie camera, and of course there was no sound with any of it, but they just wanted to get images, moving images of their heroes. And over the years, I have, through networking and, I'm a big flea market guy, I've started to come across these films, and they are fascinating. With what you can do now with digital scanning technology, I mean, we were looking at some last night, Joe. Some of the things you saw last night came from 8mm, and there we are in the theater looking at it the size of a building, and the quality's all there. Like there's so much information that would get captured by these things. So my other specialty for these films is, they'd say, Eric, this film of the Beatles, what is it? And I'd say, well, this is the afternoon show in Detroit, September 1964, and they're doing this part of this song, this part of that song. At this point, I can lip read and see what they're playing. And so then I put sound underneath. So maybe there's not a recording from Detroit, sound recording, but maybe there's one, from Atlantic City a week before, and it fits perfectly, because as Joe will tell you as a musician, you get into a certain groove in a band, and the way you play Twist and Shout in September is not how you're going to play it in December. Something will change in the dynamic. So I'm pretty good at doing that. So that's what I would do. I'd put together all of these things and then help the writers assemble the story.
I didn't realize you took audio from show A and video from show B.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, and when you can get the stuff, like now there's a little segment I have I'm working on a TV series now for A&E, fingers crossed, 3 2-hour episodes, and it will take you through the 1964 American tour as in detail as never before. I kind of got a bug for this calendar way of doing things, like we start on August 18th and our series ends on September 22nd. I got this from working with Wingnut Studios, better known as Peter Jackson. I worked on the first 20 minutes of the Get Back TV series. And his method of going through day by day by day, I just thought, oh, this is how to do it. Don't hop around, So,
Did you see the Get Back?
No.
It's on Showtime or something.
Okay.
oh yeah, it's still out there.
It's the guy from Peter Jackson.
Yeah, he did all the
Lord
Hobbit
of the
movies.
Rings.
Ah, okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
Lord of the Rings.
Familiar.
stuff.
Yeah.
I always called the Hobbit movies.
He did that great war movie.
Isn't that incredible? They shall not be forgotten.
It's the World War I movie. And what he did was, is it part of the movie or was it just at the end at the theater? But they showed how he took this black footage. It got all moldy or black.
Yeah.
He resurrected it. And you actually see World War I with footage that was gone.
Well, not only that, one of the things Mr. Jackson, I call him Mr. Jackson. He's like 2 years younger than me, but I just have so much reverence for him. He's he did that World War I picture. That once again, he is on the forefront of technology, and so a lot of that World War I stuff. If you watch it now, the frame rate was very. It was like 14 frames a second. You and I are used to seeing like 60 frames a second. So sometimes when they would transfer those old films, everybody would be moving fast because they didn't have a variable speed to show it and put it into what we call a film chain to make it onto video. So what Jackson did is, as well as cleaning all of that stuff up, he uses a technique we call interpolation. So the computer will look at this frame and then look at this frame and then say, well, I think the computer could figure out what the motion frames would be in between. And so it smooths it out. It looks like it was shot yesterday.
Wow.
The other thing, Joe, I don't know if you knew this, Peter's people, his assistant Claire and I were speaking about this. His attention to detail, when it came to colorization, they actually went out to all of the locations where World War I happened, where the film was. And they shot at the same time of year, same time of day. They shot color reference pictures so that they got the sky right and the grass right. And then the most incredible part of all, to me, is they could tell where all of the different soldiers were from. Because the regiment, there's a way of identifying. These are Scotsmen, these are guys from Hull, and they got lip readers in so they could see what every person was saying in the film. And they hired actors from those regions so that it was authentic accents. So like I say, that guy is hats off.
He's probably the most brilliant filmmaker in the world today.
And the world's biggest Beatle freak. That guy is...
That is good for us.
Yes, it is good for us. Because there's yet another project that's going on now that he's not the director, but his technical abilities have been employed. I've been hired as a consultant to work on something that's going to premiere in February 2024, right on February 7th. And it's going to be the 60th anniversary of the day the Beatles landed in America for the first time as a group. George had been here before.
Maysles Brothers?
Yes, and
Now,
a lot of...
Maysles Brothers, they were my first interview when I was in high school
No kidding.
at the Charles Street Theater.
Oh, yeah.
It was all the high school papers, and it was a round table, so we all had to ask questions. But I got photos and stuff, right? But then my bass player, Bruce Fromke, his sister Susan Fromke was there when Keith Richards wrote Satisfaction.
Wow.
And I'm up in the office, I'm up in the mails, and I'm watching the Beatles Ed Sullivan footage
Yeah.
that had never been aired.
Yeah. Well,
So that's the stuff that's going to be aired, right? I saw it in the 80s.
I think they said 9 additional hours. Now, how much of that is going to be out, I don't know yet. But there was 9 additional hours on top of the, say, 2.5 that we've seen.
What is the weirdness of my first interview and then the bass player taking me up to the Maysles office? How?
And I did an event with Albert.
Did you?
Yes, 10 years ago. And
What was
that-
his brother's name? Because I had both of them there.
David was the sound guy.
Okay.
But Albert
David
was the
and
film guy. David had passed by that point, but Albert, we did something at the Paley Center. It was Albert, it was John McEwen, the great film collector, big Beatles film collector, Mark Lewison, and the other guy, Grossman, the photographer. Is it Milton Grossman? I'm trying to
Albert
remember.
Grossman?
No, not Albert Grossman, but I think it was like Milton. Anyway, so the guy, he was a great Beatles photographer, and he's also passed as well. So, but yeah, we did this event down there. I got to speaking with Albert, and that's when I first heard about all the extra footage. He told me that they'd shot a whole lot more, and so
I saw cars in New York, just like maybe the Beatles cars. This is what I remember from Bruce taking me to the office. So this is going to be how many hours?
that I don't know yet. I mean, they've got so much.
Right.
I'm hoping they make it into a mini-series like what A&E has asked us to do. We have 6 hours to fill. And I think I can say with decent authority that all of these little bits and bobs, these things that I find, lost news footage, for example, lost home movies, we're gonna fill that with a ton of stuff people have never seen.
Darren, when I interviewed them, it was Gimme Shelter, the Rolling Stones movie. And I'm this ultimate Stones fan. And, that was 71, 72. And then in 83, I became the manager of the Stones' major producer.
Oh, yeah, that's
So,
right. That's
Jimmy
right.
Miller.
Jimmy.
So it's it's what we love.
Yeah.
I love the Stones. You love the Beatles. And
I love the Stones too. It's just,
I know. But the thing is, your forte is the Beatles. My forte is the Stones. If you're gonna ask one a Stones question, you come to me. The Beatles, you come to you.
I've got one for you. I've got one for you.
All right.
Okay. So part of what I do is digging through boxes of tapes, and we have a couple of friends of mine. We're all nutcases like this. A lot of archival, a lot of poking around for things, and sometimes you hit oil, and sometimes you don't. So we got a box of tapes about a year ago, little 3-inch reels, which usually is promising because this is what the teenage kids were using. And the teenage kids, if the Stones are on the radio or whatever, they're taping it, So something, Joe, that has been rumored to exist forever, and here it is on a little 3-inch reel. Brian Jones doing drive time, KRLA radio in 1965. Reading the weather reports, doing the traffic, and picking out his favorite records to play. And I mean, it's just magic to hear, the 405 is just terribly congested this morning. It's just,
But it's
Brian.
like the John Lennon in your movie last night.
Yeah, like
John Lennon doing the weather
well,
report.
and but this is 10 years earlier, and I know some heavy Stones people are like, no, everyone's looked, it doesn't exist. And I said, guess what? I found it, So those are the little discovery moments, and then it's kind of like building
Preserving history.
well, it's like building a dinosaur. Like, the bones, I found this here.
I was gonna
Okay.
say, it seems like archaeology.
It is, it's rock and roll archaeology.
Now, are you seeking out, or are people coming to you?
Both.
Both. Okay. Because
Yeah.
I'd imagine if people have this content, they likely want to share it.
Sometimes they do, and sometimes they they go one of two ways. Either they just want it out in the world, or they want $1 million.
Oh, okay.
And
It's a very different approach.
we had I can't name, there was a famous 1960s act, shall we say, that now controls a very interesting 20 or 30 minutes of Beatles footage from their very last concert.
Certain drummer?
Can't say. Can't say. No. But no, actually, it would surprise you. It's not that. It's one that would shock you. Like, you know who they are, but you would never guess that they were involved in anything like this. So at the very, very last second, I had this whole thing set up. You know, it's going to be in 8 days a week, and last second, the office calls and says, we've changed our pricing structure on the licensing. And I said, oh, okay. You know, we want $75,000 for that. And I'm like, 750, 75,000. There's a difference there.
Quite a few zeros.
There's a lot of difference there. And I said, we don't have that.
How much a zero can change a conversation? Wow.
Yeah, we were lucky. 8 days we didn't have to pay for sync rights. The most expensive thing in doing a movie is really sync rights, which is buying the use of the music. And it's the Wild Wild West. Anyone can charge anything they want. And so we didn't have to pay for any sync rights for 8 days because the Beatles themselves were financing that film. It was, original budget was $5 million, ended up being $6 million. We were overrun by about $1 million. But that film was really only meant to be something called brand extension. It was only meant to break even, but help sell a whole lot of...
Like an investment, branding investment.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's the Beatles make all their money from T-shirts, coffee mugs, lunch boxes, more T-shirts, you know what I mean? So they don't really make as much with records or music sales as they do with the merchandising. So all that movie was really meant to do 10 years ago, or almost 10 years ago, was to extend the brand, keep them in the public eye. But what's really cool about it is it became a monster. Like it was only supposed to be in the theaters for 3 days. It was there for a month. It was all art houses, but we ended up, I think all told, I think on top of the 6 million, we made about 40 million plus on top of it. Wow. Oh yeah, they weren't expecting that. So it really did well, and that's
a lot of T-shirts.
Well, they're still, believe me, they do.
Well, I mean,
so
more
well.
so now probably than ever with how artists are able to make money. It's really not through the music necessarily.
Not selling the music.
Not selling the music, okay, yeah, but selling themselves as that brand.
Yes,
You know,
definitely.
and now with even people having concerts through Roblox, for example.
Yeah.
You know, you have this digital community where you can extend yourself across a global audience.
Well, that's almost what we were doing with this theater release, because the way it's so funny how the technology has changed. Basically, there's no film going to the theater. There's no digital disc going to the theater. It's a code that gets unlocked. The movie is sitting in a central server, and you have to have very specific equipment to unlock it, and then it ties into your projection system.
Is that what I watched last night?
That's what you watched last night.
That was wild.
Yeah.
Very clear. Wow, you don't get a disc or anything?
No, nothing. That's because of all security. They're very. You might remember last night right before our film came on. They have that anti-piracy thing. Now, I don't think I've seen a person sit there with the patience to do a whole film with their camera, and I think their camera would run out of space anyway. But it is still a problem, and this is one of the ways they've tried to counteract, that effect of people bootlegging stuff.
Check this out. I won't say the company, but I get this stuff from a company. So last night I wanted to watch something. I'll tell you after the show what it was. It's very expensive, but I'm getting it to review, and you only get 48 hours.
Yeah.
Through this animated feature was my email address.
Yeah.
Very light.
Right.
So, and I had to sign off that I would not videotape it, that I wouldn't let anyone else see it, that I could be the only critic watching it. This is last night.
It's the same technology, Joe. That's been around for a little while. When I was working on 8 Days, because I would only go out to Los Angeles every once in a while, and the rest of the time for me to do what they needed me to do, I had to be around my own archives and around my own contacts. So everything was done, through Dropbox and stuff like that. And every time I looked at something, there was my email, my phone number, the date that we're watching,
Oh, yeah.
the time, little time code going in the corner, what time of day I'm watching it. So they don't fool around with any of this stuff anymore. It's interesting.
And I gotta do a second check-in, so I have a thing right here, and I had to put in this code last night.
Yeah.
I've already signed in, and now I have to put this code that goes on my phone.
Yeah.
Very, very.
It's one way of solving the issue, and it's kind of part of the mentality. Doing what I do interface with bootleggers around the world. There's still a few left, you know. There's one guy who goes by the name of Mr. Claudel in Japan, and that's his stage name. Masahiro. If you're out there, Masahiro, you naughty boy. Anyway, so...
Well, you worked on my Marty Ballin movie.
Yes, I did. Yes. Oh, a million years ago now.
Well, it was 2008, and we put it out in 2010, so it's like the 13th anniversary.
Wow.
But Marty wouldn't do a show with Eddie Money
Oh, really?
because the Starship was playing Harper's Ferry, which had no air conditioning, and I'm like, wait a minute. Starship have not been kind to you over the years, and you've got a $5,000 show here.
Yeah.
Opening for Eddie, and we'll have the DVD out, and we're going to do really well with it.
Yeah.
But he was financially well off. I gotta stay with the Starship. So I drove him and his father home and all this stuff because I've been working with him for 25 years. We missed the Eddie Money show, and I'm just, it's the same night. And he goes and does Harper's Ferry instead of like 10,000 people, he's playing to 100 people. I'm like, he's a rock star. He's got the money. He doesn't need to. But it hurt the DVD. So then we did the show with Ernie and the Automatics opening.
Was that the Hat Show?
Hat Show.
Yeah.
It was all a Hat Show. Eddie Money was the Hat Show. Then 2 years later, the Ernie, and then he came back. And we did another show with Peter Cetera of Chicago. And we get that on tape. So the 2008 show, we finally get it out 2010, and BitTorrent killed us.
Okay.
Those
that's
2
right, 'cause
years.
They gave it out.
Those 2 years, had we put it out earlier, and Ian from Jethro Tull, Ian Anderson said to me, Joe, the DVD sales have like plummeted.
Yeah.
But he still does well. It's Jethro Tull.
Sure.
He does better than most. But we got killed by BitTorrent those 2 years, and people just stealing it all over the internet.
It is. And there's secrets. Literally, this is going to sound crazy, but I am, because of what I do. I've been doing it a long, long time. I'll get invitations to these groups, you know, that are literally secret societies. So there's one for every, you know, major legacy act you can think of.
It's kind of like the Pentagon Papers. This kid,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, the kid up in
The kid down in Dighton that stole the Pentagon Papers, and you know they just arrested him last week. It's that same principle. They have these clubs where they download my intellectual property and steal it.
Yours and a lot of other people's. You know, it's interesting that you know, there's a guy out in the Midwest. He's the only American big Beatles bootlegger left. He's out in the Midwest, and he does work very hard at what he does, but it's all stolen material, pretty much, you know, and bootlegged. I mean, literally bootlegged in the sense, pirated, I guess is the word I'm looking for. Which, and he's been getting away with it for years. He makes a sole living off of it, and so he's one of the few ones. Most of the kids today who collect, and strangely enough, some of the great Beatle fans of today are literally kids. The most talented guy I know who can take silent Beatles or solo Beatles footage and put the correct sound underneath is about to graduate from high school.
Wow.
He's 18. And this kid, I've been working with.
Prodigy.
He is. I've been working with him. I was working with him for about a year before I figured out he was not my age. You know, I mean, it's all virtual working. You know,
Sure.
never met him physically. But yeah, it was pretty funny one day when I finally, I was like, how old are you? He goes, I'm 17. You know, Jesus.
Wow.
How does, yeah, so anyway, I was about to say, is a lot of kids from that generation, everything's got to be free. You know?
Yeah,
Open
I know
source.
that. And they
Open
try to convince me that they're promoting my product when they're stealing it.
Yeah.
That there were arguments online, and it's like you're stealing my record. Take it down. One woman got my Ben Orr tape. I don't know how. Ben Orr, because I was Ben Orr from the Cars videographer, and she started putting it out on the Ben Orr fan sites.
Yeah.
And I sent cease and desist, and she ignored me. So finally, YouTube sent her, you can't do this. They stripped her of her, you know, and I won, and they put owned by Joe Viglione, and she was furious. But then the other people in the Ben Orr groups and the Cars embraced me. So now I'm a moderator in those groups. But it's interesting. We call them the hens. These women who are so obsessed with Ben Orr, they think he's still alive.
Well, you know, it's the Maryland people are like that. The Beatles, the reason the Beatles are still kind of...
Wait.
I'm sorry. I was
One woman's calling me and saying, I'm worried about Ben every day. And I'm like, he's dead. He was my friend. He's dead. Don't worry about him.
Yeah, he's not feeling
They're
no pain.
crazy. They're obsessed.
But like Marilyn, right? Marilyn ceased to be just an actor, right? She's now a gestalt. I mean, she's a thing, like a period piece. And to be into Marilyn is to be into sort of the 50s and the glamour of old Hollywood and all that stuff. The Beatles are a little like that now, where it's more than. I mean, I'm grateful there's a lot of kids who love the music and know the music, but they make all their money off the T-shirts and the coffee mugs and all that.
Your film last night, I love this movie. This, to me, is better than 8 Days a Week.
Oh, it's better.
It's better than Get Back, because we know the Get Back. And we know from the Let It Be and all that stuff, so we're kind of saturated with it.
Yeah.
But this was a murky period, and I'm a massive John Lennon fan. I mean, I'm obsessed with Instant Karma,
Yeah.
and that Phil Spector remixed it for America, right? And I'm
Yeah.
looking for and that period was murky. I didn't know the Hollywood vampires started until I saw your movie.
Yeah. Yeah, it's well, they suppressed that period. And when I say they, when John got back with Yoko,
Yoko suppressed it, maybe.
John had a hand in it because Yoko didn't name it. Remember, the name is significant, The Lost Weekend. Well, John, I learned through May, working with May for a few years on this picture, that John was a big fan of Hollywood movies. And one of his big crushes was Doris Day. He loved Doris Day, right? So May would be on the phone, I'd be like, film business. I'd say, May, I need you for 5 minutes. And then the next thing you know, it was 3 in the morning. You know, we were just going, because she never took drugs and never drank alcohol. So she was the only person who was stone cold sober throughout all this. And so she remembers everything. But yeah, the Hollywood vampires, well, to get back to the title of the film of The Lost Weekend, John was a huge fan of these 40s movies, and there was a significant one called The Lost Weekend, which was Ray Milland as an alcoholic writer and all the trials and tribulations. So that movie stuck in John's head because for the first few months of The Lost Weekend, his Lost Weekend, he was an alcoholic writer. He was drinking every day. He was out with the Hollywood vampires, partying all night. And but he, as he says in the movie, in his own words, I sobered up one day. I said, "Hey, I got to stop this. You know, we're just getting in the papers and causing trouble." So, but he branded that The Lost Weekend after he got back with Yoko. Remember, he wasn't doing anything for like 5 years, right? You know, he was just raised Sean. And so nobody knew about that period because he wouldn't talk about it. Say, "Oh, it was my lost weekend. I went out and got drunk." You know, I don't know. Instead, what you learn in the film is it was the most successful period of his solo career after he left the Beatles. He was part of 3 #1 American singles. You know, his own "Whatever Gets You Through the Night" was the only #1 solo John Lennon record in his lifetime in America. He co-wrote "Fame" with David Bowie, and that was also David's first American #1. And then the other #1 was "Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds," as recorded at Caribou with Elton. So that, and in the meantime, he puts out Mind Games album, Walls and Bridges, and you know that whole crazy rock and roll period that finally came out in February of '75. So 3 hit albums, 3 hit singles. And you as a Stones guy would know one of the great, tragically unreleased tracks, in a sense, or a very rare track, is "Too Many Cooks." John Lennon and Mick Jagger duetting in that. And all that was that time period. May set a lot of that stuff up.
Darren, we've got only 5 minutes left, so I want you to ask any questions you want of Erik.
Yeah, so I had another, and thank you so much
Sure.
for everything today, and I appreciate the history. I learned a lot from Joe, and I'm learning a lot from you. So I hear, in speaking with Joe, there's been quite a bit of radio talking about the Beatles, and Joe told me about, and if you could tell us more about Joe Pope, Chachi Loprete, Charles Rosenet, and other keepers of the flame.
Okay.
You only got a few minutes.
Oh, God. Well, Joe Pope was my mentor. He was on my teenage radio show, and was promoting something called Mystery Tour 75. And I would not be sitting here if it wasn't for Joe Pope. Because
Do you have it on tape still?
No. My aunt taped them all, and dear auntie's long gone. I'm going to go through her tapes to see if I can find it. But Joe took me under his wing. I met all the big collectors, the original bootleggers. Charles Rosenet, he's a very talented and very interesting man. he runs like Liverpool productions. He'll take you on a tour of London and Liverpool and Germany to show you all of the Beatles places.
Ian Dracula's castles.
And he's into, you know, we have a lot in common because I'm into psychic stuff and he is too. And he also published one of the greatest magazines ever, Good Day Sunshine, Beatles fanzine. So Joe Pope also created, he's the guy that invented Beatles conventions, and he created the fanzine Strawberry Fields Forever. Now the last one was Chachi, and he's my stage partner, and he's been on radio for over 40 years, doing Breakfast with the Beatles. But he and I do like a Beatles stage show. And we show rare films and stuff. That's as fast as I can be, Joe.
That's pretty good, because these are the usual suspects,
Oh.
and they're well known in the community.
Well, poor Joe has been gone a very long time.
Yeah.
25 years.
Yeah, Joe's kind of faded into the woodwork, but it's nice to keep his name alive, Joe Pope. I think I only met him once.
He was one of the wittiest people I've ever met in my life. I'll tell you a quick Joe Pope story, because everything's a pun with him. Fred Seaman, this guy that put out he's John Lennon's assistant, and he put out a very controversial book about what Lennon's life was like. And so Joe is reviewing this in Strawberry Fields magazine, and I'm waiting, and Joe is skeptical of the stories Fred Seaman's telling. The final line in the review of the book was, "I don't know about you, but I'm finding this semen a little hard to swallow."
Ooh.
I love you, Joe, wherever you are. And, you know, he keeps in touch every once in a while by tapping on the table in postcards, as the Rouse would say. But, yeah, he was a great man.
Was this published in Massachusetts, the Strawberry Fields?
Yeah, and it went out, it was very primitive.
I have a copy.
They go for like $40 each on
No
eBay.
kidding. I have a bunch of copies.
Oh, you should.
I cleaned, maybe I was 9, this is over 20 years ago. I took a job cleaning out someone's home, and the person was a publisher of this,
What town was it?
I believe Arlington or Lexington.
I think that was Joe's house.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because that must have been when...
How weird is that?
Folks, I keep telling you,
I'll
there's
give you
something
one.
to this psychic
If
stuff.
I
yeah.
still have it, I'll look through.
It was his, you know what, he used to keep stuff, it probably was Arlington, because that's where his dad lived, and his dad's basement was like the storage facility.
Exactly. I, as a young entrepreneur at 19, would do a lot of cleanouts. And
Weird.
I think I know where they are, because I do have to do my own basement cleanout, and if
Yeah.
I find one, I'll send you.
Well, I just the idea that you actually,
Yeah,
see, this is,
so-
we got a small world here.
It is.
Cosmic.
It is cosmic. Anyway,
That my city councilor cleaned out Joe Pope's house.
just too weird, folks, you know. Can't write stuff like this, no one will believe you.
Actually,
think-
the young person I spoke about it, my high school sweetheart, it was who I almost met, Steven Tyler. We were talking about it before. I bought him ice cream. He was at a hospital that my high school girlfriend worked at.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't get to meet him, but it was through her mom that I got that gig, and she lived in Arlington. So.
Yeah,
You know
there you
what?
go.
We got to do part 2 of this, Eric. We
Yeah.
got to do this because we got to sign off now because there's I think one of the Beatles is coming through, Ringo or someone, to do with an Aki Neil Staples, the greatest access director of all time. We thank you. It's April 18th. Erik Taros. The movie was wonderful.
Thank you so much, Joe. Thanks for coming, and nice to meet you, Darren.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Yep. Good work, Darren. We talked a lot of Everett today and Joe Perry and Beatles. What's
Yeah, I
better
got here as
than
fast
that?
as I could.
I'll email you a picture of that.
Yeah,
and if
please
you want
do.
one, I'll send it to you.
Oh, yeah, I'd love it. I mean, Joe was, like I say, he was a really, really cool dude. He was